Hello everybody, I'm Pearl Jean Maeve and I would like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. Heritage Iowa's mission is to help people save places that matter, build community, and live better. We'll be taking questions throughout and at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the question box at any time. Most issues with the webinar software can be solved if you just close the program and restart it with the link that was sent to you. Our presenter today is Bernice Radle, and I'm not going to ruin her presentation by telling you too much about her, but she is pretty awesome, and I'm going to hand it over to her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good? Excellent. Hi, everyone. I have to be quite honest, I'm very new at this webinar thing, so if I'm boring, please send me a comment saying that you've had enough. So, but we'll start with that, I guess. My name is Bernice, and oh gosh, where do I start? I love old buildings. I grew up around old buildings, and I've become what I call, and we all call ourselves preservationists. So I am going to give you kind of a teaser about what I do here in Buffalo, and hopefully you'll get some cool ideas from it, and maybe it'll inspire you to take, take the things that we do here in Buffalo, and take them and embrace them and use them, and try to save buildings with the ideas I give you. So again, this is a teaser. If I could, I could talk for hours about things we've done here and about things we've done around the country related to historic preservation, but we're going to talk today a little bit, and then we're going to talk at the conference a little bit, and and I even think I might be able to speak for an entire session at the conference, which will be really exciting. So I hope you guys get a little bit today, a little bit, and then the next one. All right, let's start this thing. All right, so here's me, covered in dirt. I am a 29, almost 30-year-old woman, 5'2", barely any, I'm very short and small. I'm a preservationist, a developer, an urbanist, energy efficiency nerd, and a total Buffalo lover. I started a company called Buffalove Development, and I'll explain more of this as the presentation goes on. And I also have a TV show which continues to air on the DIY Network and HGTV. It's called American Rehab Buffalo. It's 6 episodes, and basically I take a vacant American foursquare and bring it back to life. I'll talk about that in a little bit. I run this amazing group called Buffalo's Young Preservationists. I'll explain more on that. I'm also the youngest member on the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Buffalo, which is kind of cool. And I've had a lot of work in the New York Times and Huffington Post, and a bunch of other really cool publications have picked up my work, and I'm ever so grateful for that. And I get this question all the time, but I have a degree in urban planning from Buffalo State College. I think I would encourage anybody and everyone to do urban planning. So, yeah. All right, so quick slide. I was just Pearl and the crew just asked me this question, but I'll start the presentation with this. This is where I get my resilience and my love for old buildings. My father was a carpenter and a craftsman and a construction guy, and my mom has an awful disease, but I swear I get my resilience from her, and she is tough as nails. And so I like showing this slide for people to realize, where I come from. We all have hard times and hard issues, and I think that it makes us good people, and it makes us, be who we are. And this is the little Italianate house that could. This is the first heart bomb ever. This is the house that made me start Buffalove Development back in 2012, and really 2011 actually, but and to do heart bombs and to really push forward with understanding why buildings are vacant, why these owners don't do anything to their buildings, how we can save buildings, and just things, and how I can save buildings, to be quite honest. It was this tiny little Italianate house with a heart on the door that I put up there that started everything that you're going to see now. So Buffalove is a full-service real estate firm that aims, I'm all about renovating vacant and underutilized properties in the city of Buffalo. I buy, renovate, and I rent them. I rarely sell them. Just because you're a corporation or an LLC doesn't mean that you're a bad guy. I have amazing renters and good people that pay me rent and live in my amazing little houses, and it makes me a very happy lady. So Buffalove Development basically is currently going through an expansion that I'm very, very proud of, and that I actually haven't really talked about yet. You guys are getting sort of a glimpse into the future. But I just expanded Buffalove to a full-service brokerage, real estate sales, consulting, property management, and development firm. Before, we were just sort of doing development, one house at a time, but I just took on a giant client to do a development partnership with that is 100 units in the city of Buffalo. So I just now have maintenance guys and all kinds of other things that I never had before, but it's a great and exhausting time in my personal life, but a lot of that wouldn't have happened had I not just sucked it all up and bought a vacant house at the city auction. So what started in the lower left-hand corner here, you can see the gray house and the teal blue house. I actually am currently speaking from the inside of the gray house that you see that's being renovated over time. And it's a beautiful house that I now live in that's fully renovated and restored. So, one house at a time, one block at a time, one lawn at a time. I always say one day at a time. We're always working hard to incorporate preservation and incorporate energy efficiency. Things like dual flush toilets are just the standard in my world, right? But also restoring clapboard, another standard in my world. So we always look at restoring houses all over the city of Buffalo. If you have questions, by the way, we're happy to answer. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But I'm going to go a little bit at the conference, at the Heritage Ohio conference. I'm going to probably talk for a long time about starting a small-scale development company and rehabbing houses one house at a time. So if you do have interest in that, I'm happy to talk and happy to explain more in detail, because I could give you everything from structuring a business to finding a loan to finding the building and beyond, because it's a crazy process. By the way, if you hear a cat in the background, it's because my cat is very loud, just like me, so I apologize if you hear that, but he's actually currently meowing at the birds outside. So it brings us to American Rehab Buffalo on HGTV and DIY. I spent 4 months of my life basically on camera. It got so crazy that once the cameras went away, I still felt like I had to scream out loud, turn my mic off, I have to pee, because I was so attached to a microphone for 4 months of my life, which is great. I'm not complaining. So basically, in a nutshell, there's 6 episodes out there. You can get on Amazon. You can see it on DIY. It was just on DIY last week. And it's a beautiful American Foursquare. It was the last vacant house on the block. Bought it at the auction for $16,000. And it was just a beautiful, incredible transformation. And I was very thankful that HGTV really embraced my love for historic preservation, keeping the original wood windows, bringing in historic elements when things had been stripped away. I begged to keep the tile in the bathroom to the point of tears, because they didn't think that it should be saved. Just things. Just so much. There's so much preservation there. It's just insane. And I'm very happy about American Rehab Buffalo, and also working in the works of doing something else with TV Land, as I call it. But those things I have to keep on the down low until they're official. So I would encourage you to check out American Rehab Buffalo. Check out American Rehab Detroit. There's other series as well that are in different cities. And if you have critiques, I'm more than happy to hear. Okay, so let's talk about today's goals. And this is a teaser, so I'll be quick. I want to talk about heart bombs and the vacancy vortex. I'll explain what those are in a sec. Ideas and solutions for preserving old buildings. I'm only going to one example, and I think you'll all love the example, by the way, because we all have to build it. I'll explain it. You'll just love it. And of course, I have to give you a call to action, which is to convince you to love and visit Buffalo. And while I'm on that topic, you know, summer's coming. You can get in a kayak and travel down a river and be surrounded by grain elevators on a 75-degree day in downtown Buffalo. I would encourage you all to come, and I'd be happy to give you a tour, and we can get inside grain elevators, and it just it'd be great to have you. If you're really into preservation, I welcome you to come all day, any day. All right, so BYP. Buffalo's Young Preservationists, we are, like I say, out-of-the-box thinkers who aren't afraid to get dirty. We're creative, young professionals, and by young, it's really 21 to 35-ish. We don't really get into the kids side of things, but our motto is, if you can drink with us, you can hang with us. So we have people from all ages. It doesn't just mean young, but it's just young thinking, you know, getting creative, not afraid to break some of the rules, but do it in a way that, you know, you don't get arrested. So, you know, as I say, we're a rogue group. We do a lot of projects, and this is just a small group of them, but these are things that you can do in your communities to try to encourage historic preservation, try to encourage the millennials to get involved if they're not already. You know, keep in mind that the millennial generation, we love community. We love making an impact. I don't know, we were all born with pretty much the same idea that we want to do something that matters. So there's a lot of people out there that really want to do something, and they're just they're not pulled. You know, they're an untapped resource. So the first thing that we do is we do happy hours. Beers bring people together, and we spend 20 minutes of the 2 to 3 hours actually talking about preservation initiatives, but the majority of the time is spent just talking and hanging out. Because, as I say a lot, preservation is a very passionate thing, and you get a lot of people that will fight because they're so passionate, but you fight less, or you at least respect everybody if you're friends first. So when you do happy hours and events that are bonding, you know, that bond, kind of create that bond, it's so important, because you know, then you don't yell at somebody for taking a different stance on a building. You look at them in the eye and say, I love you, but I don't agree with this. We do a lot of advocacy campaigns for all kinds of historic buildings and urban planning related things. We work to change policy in Buffalo. We do lots of tours and events always. Jane's Walk is coming up. We do neighborhood walks. We do tours of old buildings. You know, we'll do an ice cream tour and a building and go see a building at the same time. You know, anything that gets people around historic buildings is important. We do something that blows people's minds every time I talk about it. We do what we call board and seals. So we take vacant buildings that we don't want to see vacant anymore, and if they're owned by the city or owned by a private owner, we don't care. We basically, on a Saturday afternoon, will show up with plywood and paint and tar and whatever it takes to seal the building and stop the weather from getting in. So with that said, I mean, to repeat that, we go in buildings that we don't really know the owners to, and we will seal them and board them. We'll mow the lawns, we'll put tar on the roof, whatever it takes to stop weather from coming in. And that's a really important thing that blows people's minds, because they always ask, well, what about insurance, and what about this, that, and the other thing? We just show up with a team of 20, you'd be surprised. We've cleaned out churches, we've cleaned out theaters, we've boarded theaters, and I'll explain it more. I don't want to get too deep. Well, I'll show you some pictures in a second. And then we also do what's called preservation speed dating. This is typically every 6 months. We get the community together, anybody interested, and we do a variety of really fun projects. We basically, it's like speed dating, except for instead of people to people, it's people to historic preservation projects. So you get 2 minutes to talk about your project, and then you tell it to the entire community that shows up, and now they, in turn, try to volunteer for your issues and your initiatives. It's fun. Okay, so here's some pictures of BYP. One of my critical pieces of advice in life is if you didn't take a photo, it didn't happen. So one of the things that scares politicians beyond belief is when I show them pictures of 20 or 30 or 40 young people who have energy, it scares them. We're called a small army. And it's funny because we're always smiling and happy, but we can be mean when we need to be, and we can show up with signs, and we can act, become really active when we need to be. So photos are incredibly important, tours are important, happy hours are important to get to, to building a community of preservationists, things like that. Here's some pictures of our board and seals that I was talking about. Boarding on the left here, we're boarding all guys, unfortunately, in that photo, but boarding an old building called the Wild Root, where Wild Root Hair Tonics was made in 1940. The picture on the upper right is an old historic theater that had been forgotten forever, which is actually now being restored. We went in and just cleaned it out. We hired a contractor to pump for $100 to pump out all the water out of the basement. We'll do whatever it takes. And on the lower left, or on the right here, you'll see us surrounded by garbage. We did cleanouts for houses, for people who buy vacant houses that just need some manpower. We'll come in on a Saturday and, 7, 8, 10, 20 of us will get together and just start cleaning things out. And, for 2 hours of work and some pizza, you'd be surprised what we can get done. Here's some pictures of Buffalo. Had to throw these in here. This on the left here, this is what I'm talking about. We can go kayaking along those grain elevators. So if you come to Buffalo, we will be in that water, and I swear it will be a magical experience. Here are some pictures of vacant houses. I got to talk about how vacant Buffalo is. Now, being from Ohio, you guys understand vacancy. But when I speak in Denver or Boston, they don't understand what I'm talking about. Buffalo has a third of its city vacant, or vacant lots at this point. We're tearing down buildings left and right, and it's devastating. There's just so much work to do and not enough people, and I'm sure you guys all understand that. I'm sure. Here's some photos of, on the left, a church we were cleaning out. On the bottom right, another church that just had a devastating fire that we're all scrambling to save right now. The picture on the upper right is where alternating current was invented by Nikola Tesla. Insane that it's vacant and sitting there. It's unfreaking believable. And in my opinion, so we're working hard, and these are the buildings that we're trying to save every day. In fact, side note, one of my mentors just bought a Tesla, so we drove the Tesla down to the Tesla building, or Nikola Tesla building, and just soaked it all in for a second. And I was like, this is absurd that this, this important building is sitting here vacant. I mean, that's what Buffalo has. And Ohio, all the Rust Belt's filled with just these beautiful, historic, important buildings that are just lack a new purpose. They lack a new life, but there's no shortage. We just have to get resources to them, Here's some more pictures of Buffalo. While I show you the negative, I have to show you the positive. We have incredible architecture, and we have a lot of buildings being renovated again. We have we're like 17 in the country for bicycling. Just a lot is happening here. Here are some other, everybody knows the Guarantee Building, which is just one of our iconic buildings, but we have the tiny cottages and beautiful skyline, and it's really a city that, it is the Queen City. It really is. And it's very Midwestern. People think New York, whatever. I'm like, no. We are definitely Midwest. We have wide boulevards. We have just incredible architecture from all the great American architects, Wright and Sullivan and Burnham and Richardson. We have them all. So it's very important to say that, because we are definitely Midwest. All right, so back to the real deal here. So how can a paper heart save buildings, and what the heck is the vacancy vortex? So again, this is a teaser. I could talk all day about this. In fact, it's taken me years to figure all this out, but I want to explain to you one of our biggest initiatives, which has been the most impactful, is what's called the heart bomb. And the heart bomb is typically a piece of paper with a funny phrase on it that we attach to old buildings. And what started as a little idea in my brain, and people literally laughing at me when I said it out loud, which has turned into something that cities across the country have embraced. From Omaha to Hawaii to Philadelphia to Wheeling, West Virginia to Columbus, to I mean New Orleans does it. It's just been an incredible 4 years of seeing it grow, and every year there's more cities that do it. So we basically take paper, or in this case, in this picture, this is a 2-story heart bomb that is, by the way, an international heart bomb. You can see it from Canada, because this building faces the Niagara River, which then faces Canada. So this is like the real deal heart bomb. But you don't have to go this big. You can do some small things. And so I'm going to explain how this is sort of the story of Buffalo, the vacancy story, and I'm going to use heart bombs to explain it. So the vacancy vortex. Okay, everybody knows what a vortex is. It's like a spinning ball of death that you see on your Apple computer, or it's a giant tornado. Things just get sucked up in it and just never come out. And so a lot of people call it zombie buildings. I call it the vacancy vortex, because in Buffalo and in cities all around the Rust Belt, Ohio is completely the same way, in my opinion. You have these beautiful old houses sitting vacant, and people want them, but the vacancy vortex traps them. And there are a million different reasons why that house is vacant, but it's so hard from the outside to understand why it's vacant, how to get it out of the vacancy crisis it's in, because there's a million different reasons. For example, so this, and I'll explain. This building, 204 High Street, it's a beautiful Italianate brick building. It's actually super big. It keeps going back. It's owned by the city. But when you call the city says, oh, no, we don't own that. Or, oh, yeah, it's probably going to go up for an RFP in the next couple of years. While it sits there and rots, okay? There's so many city-owned buildings like this. It takes an army and a campaign just to get the city sometimes to redevelop it. And I say that actually as a zoning board member, sitting on the zoning, working sort of for the city. It's tough, because when you own 20,000 vacant lots and vacant buildings, which is about what the city owns, it just ensues chaos. So it takes a village to try to save a building like this. This is another one that is part of the vacancy vortex. The city sells the street to make money because the city doesn't have any money. So a prominent developer, Carl Palladino, who just supported, well, I don't want to get into politics, but Carl Palladino, who has run for governor multiple times and lost, owns a big building on this street, East Market Street in downtown Buffalo. The city sold him the street, and now he wants to tear down all the historic brick buildings that are all around the building that he owns for parking. So those are the things that we deal with. That's a vacancy vortex. Why are those buildings vacant? Oh, well, they're being torn down for parking. So that's a big problem. But things that from the outside, if you and I were looking at the building, we would just think, oh, no one wants these buildings, tear them down. Well, that's not the case. People want them, but they're just locked up in the vortex, in the vortex. This one is one of my favorites. I talk about this all the time. This is one aspect of the vacancy vortex that just pains me the most, probably. Private demo. This little baby cottage from 1860 was on the preservation schedule because it was going to be torn down. And in the city of Buffalo, we have a policy that says any building in the city has to be go before the Preservation Board. And if they deny the demolition, there's only 30 days to try to save it. After 30 days, no matter what, unless it's in a very important historic district, any owner can tear it down. It's so sad because the Preservation Board doesn't have teeth. So in this case, this little baby cottage went, basically the owner wanted to tear it down. The owner felt it wasn't valuable. On the demolition application, it said it wasn't historic, despite the fact that this is a cottage from 1860, and it's the oldest house on the block by 40 plus years, okay? And it's an original farmhouse in what was a very historic area called Black Rock. And so here's the biggest kicker to this. This little baby cottage wasn't historic, but let's just say this. I saved this building, but this is an example of many buildings across the city that don't have, that aren't saved. And I'll explain the story very quickly. I saw the demolition application come through. I looked up the owner's information because I know how to navigate the city systems. I saw his name. I Googled his name. His name comes up because he has a LinkedIn account. So I emailed the owner via LinkedIn and I said, hey dude, I know you don't know me, but you're going to tear down this cool cottage. I'm looking to buy a cottage. Would you be willing to sell it for $1? I'll take on the liens, I'll take on the responsibility, I'll take on the insurance, I'll take on the violations, whatever it takes, sell it to me for $1. And sure enough, 3 months later, I had that key in my hand. It was a big deal. But there are like 2,000 houses like this in the city, and I cannot afford, I don't have the time to save them all. And that's part of the vacancy vortex. Private people, private demolitions, people paying $12, $13, $14,000 to tear something down when they could just give it to somebody who loves it and wants it for $1. But, there's no system in place to do that. The city would never encourage that. Unfortunately, we're trying to change that. But those are the issues that we see in these Rust Belt communities. And it's just a shame. And by the way, I'm restoring this house now. And I plan to live in this house once this is done because it's just, it's an unbelievable historic, it blows my mind every time I'm inside of it. It's so cute. And then what I call Slumlord Syndrome, everybody has dealt with this. People just ignore the houses. Even though there's demand, people call and want to buy it and want to save it, etc. Here's us heart bombing an old cigar factory. This cigar factory actually, the saddest story is we finally the building went to foreclosure and it was bought by a nonprofit to be restored, and 5 days after they purchased the building, it was burned down. So, we all went there and just cried. And we couldn't believe it because for years we had been fighting to save it, and finally we had a chance, and then it was gone. So now what we're in the process doing is trying to restore it, or trying to bring it back to life through new materials, but it'll never be the same. So it's just unheard of and ridiculous, in my opinion. Okay, so this is another one that I love to talk about. Does anyone know who actually owns this? I'm sure you guys have issues like this. The city might own a property, but maybe it transferred it to a nonprofit or something, or there's a city-owned corporation that does planning and they own it. There's a lot of this in the city of Buffalo, and I've seen this in Omaha, in Detroit. There's these like backhand deals where nobody knows who owns it, and it's just insane. And I'm going to talk about the Trico building in a moment, but the Trico building is an iconic building in downtown Buffalo, and basically no one owned it for 10 years. And I mean, how that could be just blows my mind and everybody else's mind. Estate hell is one of the vacancy vortexes parts that I cringe at. People die, and who takes care of their buildings, and then they go to rot. And if the person dies and it's wrapped up in an estate and families are fighting over it, there's no way we can get that back on the tax rolls until that's figured out. And this little baby cottage on the east side of Buffalo is still vacant today because of an estate issue. So things like that, they just kill me. What I call upside down properties are another portion of the vacancy vortex. This beautiful place was an amazing bar. It caught fire. It's in the middle of the worst part of Buffalo, unfortunately, in the east side. So the owner wants to bring it back, but nobody will give him any money to fix it up because it's not worth anything. That's another big problem. And I mean, we can only do so many bar, beer, happy hour fundraisers. I mean, it just doesn't cover the $80,000 to $100,000 that this house needs when it's only worth $20,000. Okay, and the last one here is abandoned despite public outcry. We have a major problem in our Rust Belt cities with churches. And unfortunately, the historic tax credits, they don't want you to break up churches and create new spaces for good reason. So our sacred spaces are at a critical, are like critically endangered, in my opinion. This church here is the St. Anne's. This picture does not do it justice. It's a cathedral, and the entire group of people that want to save it, they're strong, they're big in numbers, but there's just the church doesn't want to save it for a variety of reasons. There isn't enough tax dollars to save it. There's enough incentives to save it. People want to see it saved. Everybody knows, save St. Anne's. So it needs to be saved, but we can't get it to be saved. And so there's things like this all over. And it really, I think all of us on this call and all of us around the Rust Belt that are fighting for preservation, churches are going to be one of our biggest concerns. They already are, but we're reaching a really real potential for devastation if we don't figure out what to do with our sacred spaces and be creative with them. And I know in places like Columbus, you guys might have more money than Buffalo to do things, but it's all those small towns that are really going to be affected by these churches closing and actually getting torn down, and it's just a shame. So what do we do to save these cuties? I wrote down a couple things here that are very, very important. Identify target areas and important properties within those target areas. Think about taking on a neighborhood instead of a house. Creating really fun, dynamic campaigns. I'm going to talk about a campaign in a second. It has to engage everybody, including the community, including the attorneys that live in the suburbs or whatever. Everybody has to include everybody, kids and community members and influencers and politicians, etc. I always say this: use the tools that are in your toolbox. Whether it's local landmark tools, pushing to maybe make policies better and to add more tools to the toolbox is always great. Identify new tools. One of the things that preservation is just starting to embrace is social media and apps. And I mean, a great example in Buffalo that we've done, we have an entire website dedicated to vacant buildings that are at risk, because there's no tool that the city provides to pull all the information about the buildings. We've made our own. We made our own website called preservationreadysites.org that just compiles data for old buildings because nothing exists. But we, as I guess a millennial generation, I suppose, we can create apps and websites and things. So just identify new tools that work. Do not be afraid to use them. 5 years ago I sat on a panel and I said Instagram is going to be the wave of the future, and people thought I was nuts. Well, Instagram is now the wave of the future, but is fully in. But I'll tell you what the next wave of the future is: Snapchat. And I'm 30 and I am way too old for Snapchat, but I use it because I'll tell you, Snapchat is going to be the wave of the future. Every kid uses Snapchat, and if you can figure out how to do it now, you'll be beneficial later in life, or later, as it grows and as you grow. Don't be afraid. I say this all the time. If you're not making someone mad, you're not making change. It's okay to be on the wrong side of, the wrong side for a while, because I'll tell you, when you go to save a building and people tell you not to, and that building then gets saved and restored, who comes up to you and says you're wrong? I mean, that's just insanity. Put your money where your mouth is. Be a developer. Buy a house. run for office. You know, do what you can. I hate finger pointers. I hate people who complain. I mean, I don't actually hate anybody, but I'm just trying to explain. Nobody likes a complainer. Nobody says, you know, come up with ideas and solutions. Think about how you can actually impact the neighborhood. I mean, you could bring people out and do a garden project. It doesn't have to be anything intense. It can just be small but important steps in the right direction. And my my favorite thing is when in total delay. I think everyone on the call has been part of historic preservation campaigns and trying to save buildings. Sometimes delay is your favorite and best option. And unfortunately, that may mean that the building gets more weather, but it also may mean that the building gets saved. And it's a preservation tactic that I learned from people who have been doing this for 40 years or more, and something that I've tried to push on the younger preservationists is just delay, push. Let's do another local landmark application. Let's do an event in the parking lot of the building, you know, that gets people's attention and kind of delays the decision, anything. So that's that. Okay, so real quick, almost done here. If you guys have questions, you're welcome to put them in the little box there. So I want to talk about a case study that I love, and it's near and dear to my heart, and everybody can relate to it, Trico. Okay, so everybody knows Trico windshield wipers. Well, those were invented in Buffalo. And it's pretty cool, the patents, looking at them from 1916 to you know, even 1950, and how they've evolved over time. You know, it's a very simple but amazing thing that we all love, right? So, so the Trico building essentially was ready for demolition. It was the one where the city owned it, but then transferred it to a nonprofit, and there's all these long stories behind it that I wish I could explain. But long story short, it was vacant. It was going to be torn down, and it's in the heart of the medical campus. It's like there's $1 billion being spent in this area, but yet they couldn't figure out a solution for the building. But really the solution was that they wanted parking. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And so what ended up happening is they were going to tear it down, and we figured out what was happening, and we created a campaign right away called Save Trico, Don't Let It Get Wiped Away. And we immediately, you know, started a website and got the community together, and the 7 things that I just explained on the slide before, you know, we essentially used that to save the Trico building. I will say the Trico building is not 100% saved. It's been purchased and is undergoing the renovation planning process. But they're already looking for contractors and construction bids and whatnot, so I'm pretty positive it's going to be saved, which is really exciting. So we used the tools. We used local landmarking, National Register. It was the funny part about the Trico building was it was already listed on the National Register, but because it was part of the medical campus, the governor thought, you know, put pressure. I think maybe this is off the record, sorry, but I think the governor put pressure on the National on SHPO to not push it, because it's part of, you know, like Buffalo's like biggest up-and-coming area. We identified new tools. We used the Heart Bomb. We created a Preservation Ready sites, which is the website I was talking about. We did things like Chalk Bomb. Coincidentally, the owners or the managers of the building lived or operated right next door to the Trico building in a similar type of building that was not attached to the Trico building. So one night we just showed up with a bunch of chalk and wrote Save Trico in gigantic letters in the street. So that way when they walked into their office the next morning, they could be really pissed off. And I'll tell you what, it really worked. And then we made stickers, and we put stickers on their front door. We put stickers on their electric car charging meters outside of their front door. We were not messing around, and they were so mad. The main owner, or the main manager of the Trico building, who wanted to tear it down, he couldn't take his kids to hockey practice without someone asking him what is going on with Trico. And that's how we created a really successful campaign. We engaged the community. We did fundraising and petitioning. We created our own engineering study. I mean, we weren't afraid. We kept going, and we delayed. We spent 3 years of back and forth negotiating. We did local landmarks when we thought, the building was going to be torn down, we said, fine, we'll do a local landmark application. Then they would deny the local landmark application, and then we would do another local landmark. So we kept delaying and delaying. And I put this slide on here because it's important. We did the heart bombs, we did signs. Well, the one big kicker, I think, that sort of ended the should Trico be saved or not was when we started getting Trico tattoos on our bodies. And I know you're probably laughing right now, but I swear if you want to save a building, perhaps convincing a couple people to get tattoos is a very good idea. And, because the mayor, he, took a step back. I know you can't see me talk right now, but I'm so, I wish you could see me because it's just funny to see my reactions. But the mayor takes a step back and says, my God, you've got Trico tattoos. It really must mean a lot to you. And we were just like, well, duh, this is a 600,000 square foot industrial plant that could be renovated, instantly with historic tax credits, and it's in the best location. There's no reason why it shouldn't be saved. And I think that tattoo was the tattoo was sort of the turning point for Trico and really made everybody think twice. So that is really all I have. This is supposed to be a teaser, but what I wanted you to do or to learn was what the vacancy vortex was, and identify the heart bombs, look at the heart bombs, see how they can impact your community, and also give you a little bit of a case study. Like I told Pearl, I could talk for hours about renovations and whatnot, but I can open it up to questions and be happy to answer anything you need.
Great. Thank you, Bernice. This is Frank Quinn from Heritage, Ohio, and let me tell you, nothing makes the over 40 crowd break into a cold sweat quicker than someone telling us we have to learn a new social media platform. But if that's the case and Snapchat is the it thing, then I guess we all better get on it.
Yeah, well, you can always have one person do the Snapchat for the organization, but I promise you it's hard for me, and I'm 29, it's hard for me to understand Snapchat, and it makes me also explode a little, but it's definitely something to think about.
Well, this was a great presentation, Bernice, and we are so excited that you're going to be joining us at the Old House Fair. And I wanted to let everyone on the webinar know that this is kind of like a teaser also for our Old House Fair coming up. And this is our second annual one, and we're going to kick it off Friday evening, May 6th, starting at 6 p.m. at Root Candles, right off of downtown Medina. We have a special reception that Bernice is going to be at. Saturday morning, we're kicking off the Old House Fair with a special Bernice Radle inspired pep rally for all of us preservationists. If it's anything like this presentation, I think we're all going to dive into the Old House Fair really excited and ready to learn. And so if you're contemplating the Old House Fair, I hope you will join us. Tickets are only $10 a person, and there's going to be a lot going on, great sessions, great vendors. You can demonstrate your prowess during our Old House Fair Olympics. Bernice is going to be one of our celebrity judges to help with that. So we'll definitely encourage you to go to heritageohio.org and check out Old House Fair.
All right, and I'm going to give everybody some time to ask some questions. We already have a couple, and I know Frank has a few that he wants to ask. But we're starting off. Mara Johnson wants to know, Bernice, what kinds of relationships do you have with other affiliate organizations?
Oh, I get that question all the time. Thank you, Mara. So BYP is not affiliated with, let me back up. There are two major preservation organizations in Buffalo, and that's Preservation Buffalo Niagara and the Campaign for Greater Buffalo. Both of them play amazing roles, and the campaign is more of a chain yourself to buildings kind of group, and Preservation Buffalo Niagara is write a letter and work silently but stealthily kind of group. So we actually we don't how do I say this? We are not connected to them in any way, to either of them, but we do work hand in hand with both organizations all the time. And typically when there's an email, you know, about a building that is on fire or something, it's Preservation Buffalo Niagara and us and the campaign all on one email. And that's very important. And why BYP existed is because, unfortunately, the young preservation, when we started, there was no room. We felt there wasn't any room in either of those organizations to accommodate our needs. You know, we tend to be active and advocate, but we're also, we also will be at the table. We kind of do both, but it was sort of one or the other. So that's why we formed Buffalo's Young Preservationists, which is a very interesting thing. So, but we're not connected. We do work together, and we don't really raise any money or anything. We let them do their thing and raise their own money and whatnot.
All right, and Gregory would like to know, Bernice, how do you work around people's schedules and create ways for people to get involved? Many YPs are in the middle of getting their careers off and running, and it's difficult to work around schedules.
I think that's a wonderful question. So when BYP first started, we were all just right out of college. You know, we were like 21, 22, 23, and we all just, you know, we had so much free time. And then one by one, everyone started buying and owning houses. And, you know, many of us bought dollar houses. Several people bought fixer-uppers. And now we're like career, own houses. Some people are having babies. And it's just fascinating to see. But I'd say we always make room for happy hours. We've done a pretty good job, I'll say, on getting younger people in the mix also. So now that we've kind of grown up, we're 29, you know, 28, 29, 30, etc. We now have an influx of younger ones that sort of fill in the gaps for schedules. But we typically do happy hours on like Monday or Tuesday nights around 6 or 7 o'clock at night. You know, it's early enough, and also on an off day. And then we do breakfast meetings because people have time before work. So we'll meet around 7:30 in the morning, and we'll meet. And a lot of it is done, oh, I forgot to add. So one of the ways we organize one of the ways that we organize that's critically important to our organization, and you should really write this down, is we organize offline, but through an app. We organize on an app called Slack, S-L-A-C-K, and essentially, in a nutshell, all 80 of us are signed up on Slack, and we can talk all day, every day if there's an issue. So we always feel connected, but we don't always have to meet, if that makes sense. And then when we do our board and seals, they're always Saturday mornings from like 10 to 1, and people, even if they got drunk the night before, they can still wake up in time to make it.
That is.
Hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Okay, so I hear from a lot of people, Bernice, that being a landlord is not their favorite thing to do. And when I hear you say you very rarely sell your properties and instead you're renting them out and you're being a landlord, what's your secret to, I don't know, having good tenants or finding good tenants or keeping good tenants so that you're not frustrated from that landlord-tenant relationship aspect?
Yeah, you know, I will say that's a very, very, very good question. I will say that I was very hesitant to take on property management. I property manage 130 units right now. A friend of mine who's a developer, you know, because to be honest, it brings money in the door and helps me survive, which is incredibly important. But I will say that probably the number one thing I do is I keep my rents at a decent price always. So the whole market around here could get like a $900 apartment. My apartments are about $800. The reason why is because I get good people and I want to keep them. So they're very well aware of, I never have turnover because they're very well aware that the apartments could be more expensive. And they're also, they believe in me and they like to be part of the renaissance of Buffalo, also good. But the second thing that I do that I think sort of sets the tone for my rentals is I always try to do something very special in each one of them. So in the kitchen of one of my places, I had an artist wheat paste, which is basic. I'll explain it, but I had an artist wheat paste the Buffalo skyline in the kitchen. So in the kitchen of one of my apartments is basically this really cool, colorful photo of Buffalo, basically like wallpaper. And I don't even have to show the rest of the apartment. As soon as we walk into the apartment, it's sold. And so we always try to do things like that. I have a community garden that all my tenants have played in and eaten from and helped work in. And so I say that I think that that would probably be my two key pieces, is make them unique, put good people in them, and be flexible on the cost for good people. And then also, this is a side note, but I allow pets all the time. People hate allowing dogs and cats, but I think that people, good renters come with dogs and cats because they're responsible. They keep their pets healthy and alive. So if they have good pets, then they are good people, in my opinion, typically, traditionally. So that could actually be, not always, but 99% of the time.
All right.
All right, we have another question from Gregory. He wants to know, how do you get people angry, especially developers or council people, and then still maintain workable relationships?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'm a steel magnolia, so let me think about how to answer that. You can oftentimes have a good cop, bad cop relationship, but you don't have to. I've called architects and people. I've picked up the phone and told our old county executive that his new infill development sucked, and just flat out told him. I guess I should say that when people respect you and you've done a lot of work that is respectable, people will take your opinion gracefully. And if you can balance that steel magnolia, it's harder for guys to do it, but if you can balance that good cop, bad cop, that steel magnolia, I'm sweet but sassy sometimes, I think people can appreciate that for the good and the bad. And I've said to people, I know that you're mad right now, but you'll thank me later. I've also said to people, I'm sorry that you're getting this sassy attitude. I was born and raised in Niagara Falls, New York. And then they just laugh. So I think making it kind of comical but being serious is incredibly important. I had an author, a friend of mine who's an author, a big shot author in Boston. She described me in an article once. She said she's sweet but dead serious. So serious as a heart attack is what she said. So sometimes I think I use that to my advantage. If you don't have that, I would say that when you make people angry, I would say don't let them know that it's not personal. Let them know that that you're just trying to do what's right. And one-on-one with people. I know in this world we have a lot of polarization with politics and everything else, but at the end of the day, people are people. If you sit down and look them in the eye and say, I want this park saved because of X, Y, Z, and they disagree with you, if you have the guts to say that to their face, they should appreciate that. I fully believe that. I hope that answers the question.
That's great. So from the incentives standpoint and with your development business, your real estate development, how important are the national, federal 20% and then the state rehab tax credit for you to make these financially viable?
So that's a wonderful question. I actually operate 100% on private investment. So I don't use personally any tax credits or any incentives at all, mainly because the residential tax credit program is not geared towards LLC type corporation owners. However, with all that said, Buffalo is seeing a gigantic resurgence because we have 20% by the federal government and 20% by the state. So we have a 40% tax credit for any historic building that qualifies. And we're getting to a point where we're running out of historic buildings to renovate in the downtown core and in key areas of Buffalo. It's crazy to even think about it. And now we're actually getting political pressure or preservation pressure that I've never seen before, which is now they want to tear down historic buildings for bigger buildings, which is just bonkers because 5 years ago, 8 years ago, and a decade ago, we were just fighting to keep these buildings standing because there was no investment. So I think the historic tax credit program has been key to Buffalo, but it does not do enough for a small scale developer at all. You know, it doesn't make any sense to do the historic tax credit process unless it's $1 million or greater, because the time and the energy and the money it takes to hire the right attorneys and the preservation consultants, et cetera, it's a lot of money and a lot of upfront investment. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of money left at the table that you could be taking advantage of.
I agree with you. I agree with that. But unfortunately, the residential tax credit, you know, I mean, it's not set up for building LLC owners, and the big tax credit program is only set up for LLC owners, but only for big buildings. You know, and my buildings, although now I have some buildings that are 3- or 4-story brick, those could definitely be considered. It's extremely hard to make it work. I could give a whole talk on private financing though, because that's fun.
Yeah, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people who would listen to that. So I guess one last question for myself. So one day Bernice is working on her house, rehabbing it, swinging the hammer, and the DIY network executive just happened to be driving by and looking out the window, and it's like, oh, we got to put Bernice on a DIY show. But I'm guessing that's probably not the process for how you quote unquote discovered.
No. Do you want me to tell you that process? It's pretty easy.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was similar to that. I have a great visual with me with a hammer. No. Basically, in a nutshell, the HGTV network was in Buffalo looking for, like, trying to scope out the city. They had heard a lot about the city, and they wanted to come see it for themselves. So production companies, they come and go. But this production company that came to town, look at the city, and asked if there were any rehabbers in town that they could meet with. And so they asked, let me back up a second, they asked Visit Buffalo Niagara, which is a tourism board that promotes, you know, tourism and conferences, et cetera, in Buffalo, like a chamber of commerce type deal. So I know everyone at Visit Buffalo Niagara because Buffalo is a city of 250,000 people. We know, you know, everybody kind of knows everyone else. And so they sent me an email saying, oh, this company's in town, can you just take them around? So I took the company around, but when they found out what I was doing, they were like, oh, this is the TV show. So it really came, I swear to you, that was in November. I did a Skype interview with some people in LA in December, and like by January, there was like a $2 million project, you know, which I did not get all that money by any means, but, you know, they wanted 6 episodes, and I did not believe it was happening until the cameras showed up. Actually, until I was buying clothes for the show. I was like, oh, shit, this is really happening. Like, this is crazy. So I will say that, yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
So we have 2 more questions. Amanda Golding wants to know, does the city help incentivize you with property tax abatements or any other incentives?
Yes. So the city has property tax abatements. I do not take advantage of them because I'm stupid, to be quite honest with you. I just found out of one that exists. They don't advertise, I should say. And I just found out about a 10-year tax abatement for single-family houses that literally in the last 2 weeks I found out about it. But they do tax abatements. One of the issues we have in Buffalo is we don't have regional planning, which is a good thing and a bad thing. So you see a lot of, different communities competing, so they offer a lot of tax abatements. And it really kind of makes me angry when big companies like Delaware North, who is the reason why you have a $17 sandwich in every airport in America, is because of this company, Delaware North. They ask for millions of dollars in tax abatements. I'm like, are you kidding me? This could save my entire neighborhood. But they just, so yes, to answer your question and not rant a ton, yes.
And then the last question, Aaron wants to know, you do a mix of nonprofit and for-profit work. How have you managed to figure out what and how to get paid for what, sorry, paid for and what to give away? Sorry if I need to repeat.
Okay, oh no, that is a wonderful question. So I think, well, there's a couple of things. So Buffalove Development as a whole, with this new expansion that I was talking about, now will be really the first time that I'll be able to 100% of the time have like a steady salary. And that's incredibly important, because when you're in real estate, you extend yourself financially greatly, and then you don't get a return right away. So that's hard. As Heritage Ohio knows, when people ask me to speak, I ask for money. Not a lot of money, but some money, because it has to pay some sort of bill. And then also, you can do consulting work. But to be quite honest, often, I still have a part-time job that I work for that pays me up until this recent expansion. I've always sort of worked a part-time job because of that. And, and on the nonprofit level, we do one fundraiser a year. Whatever money we make on that goes directly to our efforts. So we typically operate on $1,000, and everything else is free labor and donated. So that means we have $1,000 to buy boards, plywood, nails, etc. for BYP, and that's it. And the way we make money there, meaning on fundraising, is we typically will do, many of us are artists, so I'm not, but we will have artists donate pieces of work that are historic building related, and we auction the art off. And of course, then we have beer sales at our fundraiser, etc. And we raise about $1,000. So the nonprofit world sort of takes care of itself. The for-profit world is always a tough one. When you are starting out as a developer or as an owner of buildings, it can be really tough. I mean, if you wanted to start off and do something, buy yourself a double and live in the first floor and rent out the second floor so you don't have rent, and start one by one taking down your financial responsibilities so you can take on more risk. But yeah, it's definitely a tough game. I, for the first time this year, bought myself a new car. It's not even new, but it's new to me because I was driving around in my little tiny baby Scion trying to put toilets in and put wood on the top of my Scion that I had when I was in college. It's not a luxurious type of thing. I will say that doing an HGTV show can definitely help. So not that you make a ton of money by any means, trust me, but I was able to sell the house that we did for HGTV for a little bit of money, and that's the only house I've ever sold, and that sort of kept us going for a while. Does that make sense? If you want to, and by the way, if people want to ask me any questions, my email's up here. Find me on Instagram, find me wherever. I didn't even put my Snapchat thing up here, and that's my own fault, but my Snapchat is Bernice Radle.
All right, well, with that, Bernice, thank you so much for doing this webinar with us. Everything was just wonderful information. We look forward to seeing you at the Old House Fair, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending the webinar today. For our calendar of upcoming events, including our future webinars, please visit us at heritageohio.org. And everyone have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.